I didn't expect the quiet of the forest to make everything inside me louder. It had been years since I'd been up to the cabin, his family's cabin, nestled deep in the woods like a secret too sacred to share. But the moment I stepped out of the car, I knew something was different this time. Maybe it was the way the air felt heavier, more expectant. Or maybe it was just me, carrying something I hadn't had the courage to say for far too long. I adjusted my backpack and glanced toward the porch where he stood, waving at me with that same crooked smile he'd had since we were kids. His hoodie was too big, the sleeves swallowed his hands, and his hair was a mess like always, but something about him had changed too. Taller, broader, more relaxed in his own skin. I hated how my heart jumped a little. Still did, after all, these years. We'd met in school, somewhere between a group project and mutual late-night gaming sessions. Over time, he'd become the person I texted without thinking, the one who knew what my silences meant. We were close. Close enough for inside jokes and shared playlists, but not so close that I could admit how I felt every time he sat just a little too close, or every time our hands brushed and I pretended it was nothing. The weekend was supposed to be casual. A break from the city, a little air, some hiking, and no expectations. Just the two of us. Alone. He tossed me a beer as I reached the porch. Took you long enough. Thought you'd chicken out. Was tempted, I admitted, catching the can midair. But figured I'd regret it if I did. Good. Would have had to drink all these alone. He nudged the cooler with his foot and grinned. I smiled back, but my chest felt tight. This place, this quiet, pine-framed world away from everything, felt like the kind of setting where secrets didn't stay hidden long. And as we stepped inside, the old wooden floor creaking under us, I couldn't shake the feeling that by the end of this trip, something between us was going to change. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I was tired of pretending I didn't want it to. He was already unpacking by the time I set my bag down in the corner of the room, same room we always stayed in when we were younger. 2 twin beds, 1 old wooden dresser, a dusty bookshelf half filled with paperbacks neither of us had ever touched. Everything smelled like cedar and thyme. "You still sleep with your socks on like a psychopath?" he asked, tossing his hoodie onto one of the beds. I smiled, not because the joke was funny, we'd recycled it at least 100 times, but because he remembered. He always remembered little things, even when I didn't think he was paying attention. "Only if you keep snoring like a freight train." He made a face. "I don't snore." "You do. It's like camping next to a bear with allergies." "Then I hope you brought earplugs." We laughed, and it felt easy, like muscle memory. That was the thing about us. We didn't need to try. Everything flowed, built off years of in-jokes and little traditions. The stupid ghost stories we used to tell in the dark. The ridiculous dares that got us grounded. Even the one time we tried to build a treehouse and gave up after 20 minutes to eat cereal on the porch. We were close. Everyone knew it. His mom used to joke we were joined at the hip. There'd been birthdays, road trips, too many late-night conversations about nothing. He was the first person I came out to, and he didn't flinch, didn't ask questions, just handed me a drink and said, "Cool. Want to watch something dumb?" Still, there were lines I hadn't crossed, things I'd never said. I didn't want to risk what we had, even if some part of me hoped, quietly, constantly, that maybe he felt the same. Later that evening, we unpacked the sleeping bags. Mine unrolled perfectly. His didn't. "Well, this sucks," he muttered, holding up the, mangled zipper. "Guess mine's broken. Should have checked before we left." "Yeah, but where's the thrill in that?" He grinned, then glanced down. "Think we can share one?" I looked at him, maybe a beat too long. He didn't seem fazed. He rarely did, but my stomach twisted in that familiar, awful way. I played it off with a shrug. "Sure, long as you don't hog the covers." The words came out casually, but I felt anything but. Sharing a sleeping bag wasn't a big deal. We'd done dumber stuff, fallen asleep shoulder to shoulder during movie marathons, crashed in hotel beds during college trips. But this felt different. Maybe because it was quiet here, isolated. No distractions, just the woods, the firelight, and the silence between us. That night we sat outside for a while, drinking from mismatched mugs and watching the flames dance in the pit we'd built earlier. He leaned back in his chair, eyes half-lidded. "Remember the time we got lost in those woods behind your house?" he said. "You were so convinced we were gonna die." "We were 12, I said. "And you were the one who thought a squirrel was following us." "It was following us." I smiled, but my chest ached. His voice was softer than usual, tinged with something I couldn't quite name. The firelight made his face look warmer, more open. He looked at me, and something in the air shifted. "What?" I asked, too quickly. He shook his head like he hadn't realized he'd been staring. "Nothing, just, this is nice." I nodded, but my throat felt tight. My fingers brushed the edge of my mug just to keep them busy. He turned back to the fire, and I watched the way the shadows moved across his face, the way the wind lifted his hair slightly, the way he'd always made me feel like I was right where I belonged. And still, I said nothing. Just sat there next to him, feeling like I was slowly unraveling under the weight of everything I couldn't say. It was quiet again, comfortable, but full, like something was waiting to be said, but neither of us was brave enough. Yet. The wind had picked up sometime after midnight. I only noticed because it kept nudging the edge of the window pane with a soft, persistent creak. The fire had long since gone out, and the room had that stillness that only comes deep into the night, when even your own breathing sounds too loud. I turned slightly and felt the warmth at my back. He was still asleep, or at least he hadn't moved in a while. We'd both climbed into the same sleeping bag hours ago, after some clumsy maneuvering and a lot of nervous laughter. Neither of us had mentioned how close we'd have to be to make it work. And now, here we were, pressed together from shoulder to knee, his chest rising and falling slowly against my back, his arm resting lightly against mine. His leg had nudged between mine at some point. I hadn't moved it. I couldn't sleep. Not like this. Not with the rhythm of his breathing grounding me and unraveling me all at once. My mind was a slow spiral of thoughts I didn't want to admit. 2. He shifted behind me, one arm wrapping loosely around my waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe it was, for him. We'd always been physically close, friendly roughhousing, collapsing on couches together, leaning into each other without thinking. But this felt different. Because I wasn't a kid anymore. Because I'd spent many nights thinking about what it would be like to hold him for real, to be held by him without pretending it didn't mean something. I held my breath, not wanting to wake him, not wanting to move, like if I stayed still enough I could stay. In this moment a little longer. "You awake?" He mumbled against my shoulder, voice rough and low with sleep. "Yeah," I whispered. He didn't move, didn't pull away, just stayed there, arm around me, breath warm against the back of my neck. "Can't sleep?" "Not really." He was quiet for a moment. "Too cold?" "No. Just thinking. Dangerous." I could hear the smile in his voice. Yeah. Another silence, this one heavier. I wanted to ask what he was thinking. I wanted to turn around and look at him, but I didn't trust myself not to say something I couldn't take back. Not like this. Not in the dark. Not when my heart was hammering in my chest, loud enough that he had to hear it. His hand shifted, slightly, his thumb brushing against the fabric of my shirt, just a little, just enough to feel like electricity. "I missed this," he said suddenly, voice softer now. Just being out here. Us. Yeah, I said again, but it came out too thin. My throat was tight. He sighed and rested his forehead against my shoulder, like he needed to be closer, or like he didn't realize he already was. I bit down on the flood of thoughts rushing in, that part of me screaming to just ask, just say it, just let it out. But I couldn't. Because what if he was just being friendly? What if this didn't mean what I wanted it to? What if the second I said anything, it would ruin the ease we'd always had? I'd rather keep pretending than risk watching that smile change into something awkward, something distant. He let out a tired breath and shifted again, pulling me a little tighter like he was settling in. Comfortable? I asked, meaning it. More than I wanted to. Yeah. You're warm. That word, warm, landed differently. It wasn't about temperature, or maybe it was, but not the kind I was feeling. I turned my head slightly, not enough to face him, but just to make sure he was still awake. You good with this? With what? This. Sharing a sleeping bag. Doesn't feel too weird. He hesitated. Just for a moment, but it was there. No, not weird. Kind of nice, actually. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every answer felt like a trap. Every silence felt like a missed opportunity. Eventually, I felt him relax behind me. His breathing evened out. Maybe he'd fallen back asleep. Maybe he was just pretending, the same way I was pretending I didn't feel like I was holding my breath inside my own skin. I stayed awake for a long time, staring at the shadows on the wall, wondering if this closeness meant the same thing to him that it did to me, wondering what it would cost to find out. But I didn't move. I just lay, there in the quiet, with his arms still around me and my heart full of words I didn't know how to say. The next morning passed in a blur of pretending nothing had changed. He made breakfast, burnt toast and unevenly scrambled eggs, and I acted like it was the most normal thing in the world. We talked about nothing. Music, a new game he'd been, meaning to try how much he hated the way the cabin's water always smelled faintly like iron. Everything safe. Everything light. But I could feel it, still pressing on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. His closeness last night. The way he held me like it was natural, like it meant something. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head, looking for signs, clues, anything that would make it easier to speak the words clawing at the back of my throat. He didn't bring it up. Not once. Didn't tease me. Didn't joke about it. Didn't even give me one of his looks that usually said, "Come on, I know something's up." He just moved around the cabin like everything was fine. Like we hadn't slept wrapped around each other like something intimate and aching. By late afternoon, I was unraveling. We were sitting on the back deck, the forest stretching out in front of us like a painting, green and endless, too quiet. He was whittling a piece of wood he'd found near the creek. I was nursing a beer I didn't want. My knee bounced with nervous energy I couldn't hide anymore. "You're quiet," he said eventually, not looking up. "So are you." A soft smirk tugged at his lips, but he didn't push. Not yet. Another long silence, the kind that crackled with everything unsaid. "About last night," I started, then immediately regretted it. His hand stilled, blade hovering just above the wood. "Yeah?" I swallowed. I didn't mean to make things weird. He looked at me then, properly, like really looked. "You didn't." I don't know. It felt like maybe something changed. He sat back in the chair, arms resting on his knees. "Did it?" "I don't know," I said again, too quickly. "Maybe not. Maybe I just imagined it. I tend to do that, overthink stuff." He was quiet again, and the longer he didn't speak, the the more I wanted to crawl out of my skin. "I'm not trying to mess things up," I added, my voice lower now, almost brittle. I've been carrying something for a while, and being here, just us, it kind of makes it harder to ignore." His brow furrowed. "What have you been carrying?" I looked away, toward the trees. The sky was turning gold at the edges. I wished the sun would just set already, like maybe darkness would make it easier to say the things that felt impossible in the light. "I think I've had feelings for you for a long time," I said finally. "And I don't know what to do with them." There. It was out. The words hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. He didn't move, didn't say anything right away. And every second that passed felt like a confirmation of my worst fear. That I'd misread everything, that I'd just lit a match to something we couldn't rebuild. But then he exhaled. A slow, deep breath like he'd been holding it for just as long. "I wondered when you were going to say it," he murmured. My chest tightened. "What?" "I'm not dumb," he said, a faint, tired smile on his face. "I noticed little things. How you'd look at me sometimes. How you'd go quiet. When we were too close. I just didn't know if it was real or if it was in my head. So, it wasn't just me." He shook his head. "No. Not just you." I didn't realize I'd been gripping the edge of the chair until my knuckles started to ache. I let go and leaned forward, elbows on my knees, heart pounding hard enough to drown out the wind. "Why didn't you say anything?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Because I didn't want to screw this up. You've been the one constant in my life since we were kids. And I thought, if I said something and I was wrong, I'd lose you. I didn't think I could risk that." That's exactly how I felt. "Yeah." His voice dropped lower, more serious now. "But last night, holding you like that, I stopped caring about the risk." I looked at him again, and this time, he didn't look away. His eyes were softer now, but still steady. There was something in his gaze I'd never let myself believe I might actually see. Want. Not just comfort or familiarity. Want. "I kept thinking," he continued, "how it's always been you. Like, without even trying, you've become the person I feel most like myself with. And I don't think I want to keep pretending I don't. Know why?" He stood up, slow and careful, like he wasn't sure if I'd move away or meet him halfway. My heart was thudding in my ears, my skin buzzing. He stepped closer. I didn't move. His hand hovered near mine for a second before it settled, over my fingers. Gentle, warm, real. "I don't know what this means yet," he said, "but I know I want to figure it out. With you." I let out a shaky breath and turned my hand to thread our fingers together. His grip tightened just slightly, like it meant something, like it always had. And then he leaned in. No rush, no sudden movements, just slow, careful inches. I met him there, somewhere in the middle, and our lips touched, lightly at first, tentative, testing, but it deepened, slowly, like an answer to a question neither of us had dared to ask out loud until now. It wasn't dramatic or perfect. It was a little uneven, a little breathless. But it was ours. When we pulled back, we were still close. Foreheads touching, his hand brushing along my jaw. "Still overthinking?" he asked, voice soft. "Constantly." He smiled against my skin. "Good. I think I kind of love that about you." I laughed, quiet and stunned. "You're really not making this easier on my heart." He tilted his head, brushed a kiss against my cheek, and whispered, "I'm not trying to." We stood there, a while, just breathing, just existing in a world that finally felt like it was tilting in the right direction. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. We didn't go back inside for a long time. The sun dipped below the trees and the sky went soft with evening, and still we just sat there, close enough that our knees touched under the edge of the chair. Neither of us seemed in a hurry to break the moment, like we were both afraid it might disappear if we moved too fast. At one point, he shifted beside me and draped his arm over the back of my chair, fingers absent-mindedly brushing my shoulder. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't even flirty. It was just easy. Like this wasn't the beginning of something, but the natural continuation of whatever had been building between us for years. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah. I think I'm just trying to absorb all of this." "Same." He leaned his head back, watching the sky turn lavender. "Feels like we're in a dream or something. Like a weirdly quiet, emotionally loaded dream." He snorted. "You always have to make things sound dramatic." I nudged him with my elbow. "Says the guy who held me like I was a weighted blanket last night. Because you are a weighted blanket. All warm and comforting and surprisingly dense." "Wow," I laughed. "Romance really suits you." He grinned but didn't argue. Instead, he shifted a little, pulling me toward him with a confidence that made something flutter in my chest. I let myself lean into it, my head resting on his shoulder. It was strange how natural it felt, how quickly my body stopped tensing around the idea of being close to him, like it finally had permission to want what it had always wanted. "So what now?" I asked after a while, my voice small against his hoodie. "Now?" He drew out the maw. Word, thoughtful. "We go slow. We don't freak out. And we don't stop being us." "You say that like I won't totally spiral over every tiny thing." "I know you'll spiral," he said, smiling. "But I'll be right here to talk you down every time." I felt his hand drift across my shoulder, then down to gently squeeze my fingers. The contact felt steadying, like he meant it. Not just the words, but the weight behind them. "And when we go back?" I asked. "When we're not here, just the two of us?" He was quiet for a second, not hesitant, just choosing his words. "We figure it out. Maybe we don't tell everyone right away. Maybe we just keep it ours for a bit. There's no rush, right?" "No," I said, meaning it. "No rush." I tilted my head to look at him, taking in the curve of his mouth, the calm in his eyes. Something about him looked different now, like the pieces I'd been afraid to see had finally clicked into place. His expression softened when he met my gaze, and without thinking, he leaned down and kissed me again. It was slower this time, more deliberate. The kind of kiss that felt like it could be a beginning and a promise. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. "Just don't ghost me when we're back home," I teased quietly. "Ghost you? After all the emotional vulnerability I just survived? Not a chance." We both laughed, and the sound echoed out into the trees. He pulled me a little closer again, arms loose around my back, like we'd done this 100 times before. And for a moment I didn't think about the awkward conversations we might have later, or how we'd explain this to anyone else. I didn't think about what it might mean to start something that could change everything. I just sat there, wrapped in the quiet comfort of him, feeling like for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We packed up the cabin the next morning with the kind of unspoken rhythm that only comes from knowing someone for years. He folded blankets while I washed the mugs, and we didn't have to say much, just shared small smiles, quiet glances, soft brushes of fingers when we passed each other in the narrow kitchen space. It was new, and it wasn't. That was the strange magic of it all. I watched him from the porch as he tied down the last bag in the truck bed, his hoodie sleeves shoved up and hair a mess from the wind. He looked up at me with this tired but genuine smile, the kind he used to give me after a long day hanging out, like I was just the right kind of familiar. "I think we've got everything," he called out. "You triple-checked the fridge?" He groaned dramatically. "Yes, Mom. Just making sure, I said, smirking as I walked over. Don't want to leave behind that ancient mustard bottle. It has, like, a soul at this point. I'm pretty sure it predates the cabin. He nudged my arm lightly, and I nudged him back. It would have been the same old play fighting we'd done 1,000 times, except this time, when the laughter faded, we didn't move apart. His hand stayed resting at my waist. Mine slid up to his wrist. We just stood there, warm, in the sunlight, too close to be just friends, and both finally okay with it. He looked at me, not intense or heavy, just real. Still feeling okay? He asked. Yeah, better than okay. He gave a small nod and then, without another word, reached into his pocket and pulled something out. It was the little carved wooden piece he'd been whittling yesterday, something I hadn't even realized. He finished. It was a small fox. Not perfect, a little rough around the edges, but detailed in a way that made it feel intentional, personal. You remember that dumb thing you said last year about how you feel like you're constantly darting around trying to keep up with everything? He said. I blinked, surprised he remembered. Yeah, I compared myself to a fox, clever, anxious, and always 5 seconds away from running into traffic. He laughed. Exactly. So, I figured you should have something to hold on to when your brain's spiraling. He placed it in my hand, fingers brushing mine just a second longer than necessary. It was warm from his pocket. I don't need some big symbol, I said, smiling gently. I know, he replied, but I wanted to give it to you anyway. Just a little reminder that I'm not going anywhere. I swallowed around the lump in my throat. Okay, that was kind of ridiculously sweet. Don't tell anyone, he said, mock serious. I've got a reputation to protect. I laughed, and then I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't long or dramatic, just a soft press of lips, a quiet promise between us. When we pulled apart, he reached for my hand and laced our fingers together as naturally as breathing. The drive back was quiet, but not awkward. Music played low on the radio, and he kept glancing over at me like he couldn't quite believe this was real. Every time he did, I caught him and smiled. And every time, he smiled back. As the road twisted us closer to reality, I could feel the shift again, that little warning buzz in the back of my head telling me things would get more complicated once we were back in our regular lives. But this time it didn't scare me, not really, because now I knew he'd be right there beside me, walking through the uncertainty, helping me quiet the noise. We might not have everything figured out, but we had something we didn't before. Each other, finally chosen out loud. Just before we hit the edge of town, he reached over and rested his hand on my knee. Still with me? He asked. Always, I said. And I meant it.